Before we begin the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us where you watched in the comments. The late summer heat lingered over the Arizona frontier, settling heavy across Elias Ward's ranch. The land stretched wide and dry, broken by scattered mesquite trees and the slow shimmer rising off the dirt. Elias stood near the corral, tightening the last nail into a loose board. Sweat rolled steadily down his back. His shoulders ached from a day that had started at sunrise, but he kept working because work was something he could control. Elias Ward, 35, had lived alone on this ranch for almost 5 years. Before that, he had ridden with a small militia group during a border conflict. Before that, he had lost two brothers and a father in a dispute that turned violent. He rarely spoke of it. Silence had become a barrier that kept the memories in place. He had no wife, no children, and no ties beyond the land he worked and the horses he cared for. His mission, if anyone asked, was simple: keep the ranch standing, survive each season, and bother no one. He finished hammering and wiped the sweat from his brow. The sun was dropping behind the rocky ridge to the west when he noticed shapes moving along the dusty road. 3 figures were walking toward the gate. Women, wrapped in light buckskin garments, with hair tied in simple braids. They moved with calm purpose, not hurried, not afraid. Elias straightened, unsure if he should call out or wait. His throat tightened. Apache land began less than a mile past his fence line. Apache visitors were rare, especially unannounced. As they approached, he recognized Nalina first. She was around his age, maybe a year younger. A widow for 3 winters. He had seen her only a handful of times at trading posts or on the ridge her people used for gathering herbs. She carried herself with quiet discipline. Her expression was steady. Even when her eyes revealed strain she never voiced. The other 2 women, Lanza and Oyana, were widows as well. Their husbands had died in raids or illness. Elias didn't know the details. He only understood that many homes in their band had been left without men. The 3 of them stopped at the gate. Dust settled around their feet. The air was so still that Elias could hear his own breathing. Nalina spoke first. "We come to you with respect," she said, her voice low, steady. "We ask for a matter of the future." Elias nodded, but said nothing. His chest tightened with a familiar discomfort. He had never been good with unexpected conversation. He forced himself to meet her eyes. Nalina continued, choosing each word with care. "Our people lose numbers. Illness, war, too many winters with fewer men returning. Our elders say the women must secure the next generation." She paused, glancing at the other widows before returning her gaze to Elias. "We were told to ask you for help in bringing children into our band. Twins, if the spirits allow." The air seemed to stop around him. Elias's hands went cold despite the heat. His thoughts scrambled, unable to settle. He understood exactly what she meant, yet he struggled to believe the request was real. He swallowed hard. "Why me?" His voice sounded rough from disuse. Nalina did not hesitate. "Because you live honest. Because you carry no cruelty. Because you stand alone, but you do not harm others." She looked at him with a mix of exhaustion and fragile hope. "And because our elders trust a man who keeps his word." Elias felt a sharp pressure in his chest. He turned slightly, unable to hold her gaze. He did not see himself the way she described. To him, he was a man shaped by violence he could not erase. A man who lost too many people because he either arrived too late or acted too fast. A man who avoided attachments so he would never repeat the same pain. He forced a breath through his lungs and tried to think clearly. He could not answer. Not now. Not when the weight of their expectation was so heavy that he could barely remain standing. He felt fear, not of the women, but of the responsibility they placed at his feet, of becoming tied to a future he did not believe he deserved. The widows seemed to sense his turmoil. None pushed him. No impatience, no judgment. Only a quiet understanding. Nalina lowered her head respectfully. "We do not ask for an answer today, only that you think. We believe you will choose with a clear heart." Elias nodded stiffly, but his hands trembled. He hoped they did not see. Lanza added softly, "We want a future for our people, not out of desperation, out of duty, but we will not force this on you." Oyana placed a hand briefly over her own heart in thanks. The gesture was small, sincere. The three women turned to leave, walking back toward the dimming horizon. Their silhouettes grew smaller as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Elias stood motionless at the gate long after they disappeared. His pulse remained unsteady. The request echoed in his mind, pulling up old fears he had buried under years of work and isolation. Why him? What made them believe he could give anything worth having? As the sky shifted into deep blue, Elias finally stepped away from the fence and looked across the empty land. The ranch felt larger than usual, too quiet, too unoccupied. He understood something important. The widows had not simply asked for children. They had asked for a man who would stay. A man who would not disappear when life grew heavy. A man they believed he might be. And Elias, for the first time in years, did not know whether to walk back inside or walk toward the possibility that frightened him more than any gunfight ever had. Night settled over the ranch slowly, leaving the air warm and still. Elias remained outside, long after the women disappeared from the road, trying to calm his thoughts. He finally went inside the small house, but sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Nalina's expression, steady, respectful, hiding strain she did not speak of. He replayed her words, trying to understand why they had chosen him and what they expected of him as a man who had not been part of anyone's life for years. He rose before dawn, restless and tense. The horses called from the corral, and he welcomed the distraction. He moved through the tasks automatically. Hay, water, a quick check of hooves, but his mind kept circling the same questions. He needed to understand their situation better. He needed to know whether they had anyone else to turn to, whether their elders had truly sent them, and what it meant for their band if he refused. As the sun broke across the ridge, he heard footsteps approaching the gate. His grip tightened around the rope in his hand. For a moment he expected all three widows to return, but only one figure appeared. Nalina. She carried a small sack over her shoulder, likely food or materials from her camp. Her walk was quiet and measured. She stopped near the corral, waiting for him to decide if he wanted her there. She did not step farther until he lifted a hand in greeting. Her presence stirred something uneasy in him. Not fear, not discomfort, but awareness. She spoke with the calm tone she always used. "I came to help with the horses. There is a broken rail on the west side. It will fall if not fixed." Elias nodded and gestured toward the board. He appreciated that she spoke of work instead of the request. It helped him breathe easier. They moved together along the fence, handing tools back and forth without unnecessary words. Nalina finally spoke again, her voice steady. "Our elders do not push us. They gave us a choice. We came because we believe our people must continue. But we did not come to force anything on you." Elias tightened a nail, trying to settle the feeling in his chest. "How many families are left in your band?" he asked, wanting the truth rather than assumptions. "Not enough," Nalina answered. "Not enough men to guide the boys. Not enough children to fill the homes. Many women live alone. Many carry the fear that their line will end with them." She stopped working and met his eyes. "We came because we were told you would listen, even if you did not agree." It clarified more than she likely realized. He finally understood that their visit was not an act of desperation, but a decision made after long thought. He also understood that Nalina had been chosen as the one who could speak to him without unsettling him. They returned to work, repairing the fence while the sun grew stronger. When they finished, Nalina offered him a strip of dried meat from her sack. He hesitated, then accepted. The small gesture eased some of the tightness in his chest. As they ate, Elias noticed how tired she looked, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight she carried. Her people depended on her judgment. If she had made a mistake by approaching him, she would bear the consequences. Elias suddenly asked a question he had held back. "If I say no, what happens then?" Nalina lowered her gaze. "We will try again with someone else. But there are few we trust. Too many outsiders take advantage. Too many disappear after making promises." She paused. "Your refusal would not harm us, but it would close one of the few paths left." He felt the truth settle in the quiet between them. She rose to leave, brushing dirt from her hands. We will not ask again unless you bring an answer. You have time. We continue our lives. You continue yours. She studied him for a brief moment, her eyes calm, not pleading. If you need to understand us better, come to our camp. It is open to you. Elias watched her walk down the trail. The wind moved through the dry grass, carrying the faint sound of her steps until they disappeared. He exhaled slowly, realizing the decision was no longer a simple yes or no. If he stepped forward, he would join not only a request, but a community. If he stepped back, he needed a reason stronger than fear. His day continued with repairs and chores, but nothing felt the same. The ranch no longer seemed isolated. Nalina's presence remained in every corner she had walked, in the board she had helped repair, in the small piece of dried meat he still tasted on his tongue. As evening came, Elias sat on the porch, watching the sky darken. He felt the familiar loneliness rising around him, but this time it did not settle comfortably. There was a trace of something else, a question he could not shake. Was he still living this way because he wanted to, or because he had forgotten how to live any other way? The night grew quiet. He stayed outside long after the stars appeared, knowing the widow's request had become a door he could not ignore. Whether he walked through it or not would define the rest of his life. The next morning began quietly. Elias stepped out onto the porch before sunrise, expecting the familiar weight of solitude. Instead, he found himself scanning the road, wondering whether Nalina might return. The thought unsettled him. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to focus on the day's chores, but her words from the day before stayed with him. If you need to understand us better, come to our camp. He knew he needed answers. He also knew that avoiding them would change nothing. With a slow, steady breath, he saddled his horse and rode toward the Apache settlement. The land between his ranch and their camp sloped gently downward into a valley dotted with brush and scattered cottonwoods. The air smelled of dry earth and faint smoke drifting from distant cook fires. Elias felt tension tightening across his shoulders as he approached the edge of the community. He was aware of how out of place he looked, an outsider riding alone into a group that had every reason to keep their distance from men like him. When he reached the first cluster of shelters, several children paused in their play. One of the elders watched him closely, but without hostility. Elias dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm. He did not want to bring unease. Nalina approached from between the lodges, carrying a woven basket filled with herbs. The moment she saw him, her expression changed. First surprise, then a steady calm. She lifted the basket slightly. We gather medicines early. The heat dries them out by midday. Elias nodded, unsure how to start. I came to understand what your people are facing, he said. Not to take anything out of place, only to see. She handed the basket to a younger woman and motioned for him to walk with her. As they moved through the camp, she answered the questions he had held back. The band was smaller than he imagined. Several homes had been abandoned after raids. Illness had taken others. Many young boys were being raised by widows alone, and the elders feared the next generation would be too few to support their traditions, their hunting parties, and their seasonal migration routes. Elias listened closely. The quiet strength of the community struck him. Women tending children, elders weaving, young men repairing tools. Despite the losses, the camp did not carry despair. It carried determination. Nalina stopped near a corral where 2 ponies grazed. She rested her hands on the rail. We are not looking for someone to solve everything, only someone who will stand with us, even if it is in small ways. Her honesty settled something inside him. He had assumed their request was entirely tied to survival. Now he understood there was more beneath it: fear of fading traditions, homes growing silent, and children growing up without guidance. He studied the camp, absorbing details he had never taken the time to notice. You believe I can help, he said quietly, even though you barely know me. Nalina turned her head slightly. We know enough. You live alone without bitterness. You do not speak harshly. You treat your horses well. These things show a man's inside. Elias looked away, caught off guard by her certainty. He had spent years believing he was a man shaped by violence and regret. Hearing that someone saw something steadier in him worked against every doubt he carried. They continued walking until they reached a shaded area where the elders often met. A few nodded to Elias in greeting. Their acceptance surprised him, but he kept his posture respectful. An elder stepped forward and spoke in a calm voice. "If you're unsure, we understand, but we thank you for coming. A man who seeks to learn before he decides is not a danger to us." Elias bowed his head slightly. The elder's words carried no pressure, only acknowledgement. It eased the tension that had followed him from the ranch. After the meeting, Nalina walked him back toward his horse. A breeze moved through her braids, and she looked at him with the same steady expression she always carried. "You do not need to decide now. Only know that you are welcome here." Elias paused before mounting. "I don't want to make a choice from fear," he admitted. "I want to understand what it means for all of you. And for me, that is enough for today," she said. He rode back to the ranch under the rising heat, the camp shrinking behind him. His thoughts were clearer now. The widows were not trying to bind him to a duty he could not uphold. They were trying to keep their people alive while also seeking a man who could live among them with steadiness and respect. When he reached home, the ranch did not feel as empty as before. He walked the fence line, repaired a latch, fed the horses, and found himself glancing toward the road without realizing it. The silence around him felt different now. Not heavy, not painful, but waiting. He understood that whatever answer he eventually gave would shape 2 lives, perhaps many more. And for the first time, he felt the faint beginning of something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. The possibility of belonging to something other than his own solitude. The weather shifted 2 days later. Clouds thickened over the ridge, pushing shadows across the land. Elias recognized the change immediately. The air carried a heavy stillness, the kind that warned of a desert storm long before the first drops fell. He moved quickly along the ranch yard, tying down loose boards, securing the feed barrels, tightening ropes around the haystack. He hoped the storm would break farther north, but the dark wall forming in the distance told another story. He was adjusting the barn door latch when he noticed movement on the road. 3 figures approached through the rising wind: Nalina, Lansa, and Oyana. Their steps were steady, but their hair and garments whipped in the gusts. By the time they reached the porch, the first drops of rain were already tapping against the ground. "You should stay inside until it passes," Elias said, raising his voice slightly above the wind. Nalina nodded, but her expression carried concern. "Our camp is too far to reach safely now. We came to ask shelter." Elias stepped aside without hesitation. "The barn is safer than the house. It's built stronger." They followed him to the barn just as the sky opened. Rain slammed against the roof in thick sheets, and the wind pushed hard enough to rattle the walls. Elias checked every post, every support beam, making sure nothing would give way. The widows assisted without waiting for instruction, tying loose ropes, gathering tools, and moving gear away from the leaking spots. A sudden crack of thunder shook the ground. Lansa flinched. Oyana steadied a bucket that nearly toppled. Nalina kept her focus on the roofline, her breathing controlled but tight. Elias noticed the tension in her shoulders. She was afraid of a storm, but refused to show it. He climbed up the ladder to inspect the beams. Wind pushed through the gaps, spraying water across the hay. The main support was holding, but the smaller crossbeam had loosened. If it collapsed, the horses would panic, and the barn could lose a section of the roof. "Hand me the rope," Elias called down. Nalina passed it to him, her hands steady despite the noise. She held the ladder in place while he worked. Rain seeped through the shingles, soaking his shirt, making the wood slippery, but he secured the beam until it no longer shifted. When he climbed down, his breath was uneven from the effort. Nalina looked at him with a seriousness he had not seen before. "You do not think of yourself first," she said quietly. "Even in danger." Elias wiped water from his face. "The horses can't defend themselves. Someone has to." The answer was simple to him, but Nalina seemed to study it deeper. She stood closer than usual, her eyes taking in the exhaustion in his movements and the steadiness he forced into them. The storm raged for hours. Water ran beneath the barn door in thin streams. The horses paced nervously, hooves thudding against the stall floors. Elias stayed beside them, speaking in low, calm tones until they settled. Nalina joined him, offering grain and stroking a mare's neck until the trembling stopped. At one point, lightning lit the barn interior in a stark flash. Oyana gripped a post, breathing through her fear. Lances sat near the wall with her knees pulled close, trying to steady herself. Elias moved toward them, crouching so his voice carried without shouting. The barn will hold. The posts are strong. Nothing here will fall. The reassurance worked, not because his tone was forceful, but because they could see he believed what he said. When the rain finally weakened, the air grew heavy with the smell of wet earth and soaked wood. The storm moved east, leaving only distant rumbles behind. The widows remained seated for a moment, letting their nerves settle. Elias felt an unexpected shift inside himself. Their presence did not disturb him. Their fear did not burden him. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of responsibility, one that did not come from obligation, but from a natural pull to protect those who trusted him. As the sky lightened, Nalina approached. Her hair clung to her face, and her clothing was damp, but her posture remained steady. "You welcomed us without question," she said softly. "You did not hesitate." Elias shook his head. "You needed shelter. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she replied, her voice firm but not harsh. "Not anyone." Her words struck deeper than he expected. He looked away, unsure how to respond. The widows prepared to return to their camp as the rain slowed to a mist. Before leaving, Lanza paused in the doorway. "You helped us feel safe," she said. "That is rare." Oyana added, "We thank you." When they stepped into the clearing, the ground glistened under the weak morning light. Nalina lingered a moment longer than the others. The wind had softened, brushing lightly across the barnyard. "You wonder why we came to you," she said. "But you show the reason every time you act." Elias felt his throat tighten. "I'm not sure I'm the man you believe I am." She shook her head gently. "You do not see yourself clearly, but we see enough." Then she walked away, following the other widows down the muddy trail. Elias watched them disappear beyond the ridge. The barn behind him stood solid, the ground soaked but intact. For the first time, he understood that their trust in him was not based on a single request or tradition. It was built on the way he lived, the choices he made when no one was watching, the steadiness he never recognized in himself. As he closed the barn door, a thought surfaced with surprising calm. He no longer felt like a man standing outside their world. He felt like someone being quietly invited in. The morning after the storm carried a different kind of silence, clean, open, and steady. The air smelled of wet soil, and thin mist clung to the ground as the sun pushed over the ridge. Elias stepped outside to check the ranch for damage, expecting broken rails or torn shingles. Instead, he found only scattered branches and a few loose boards. The barn had held exactly as he promised it would. He moved through the chores with a clearer mind than usual. The widow's trust lingered with him, along with Nalina's final words before leaving. He felt pulled toward understanding what their lives looked like beyond the brief glimpses he had seen. If he was to make a decision that could shape more than his own future, he needed to see the full weight of their world. By late morning, he saddled his horse and rode toward the Apache settlement. The trail was soft from the rain, the earth marked with fresh footprints leading back to camp. When Elias reached the outskirts, he noticed how the storm had touched their homes. Cloth coverings drying on lines, tools laid out to prevent rust, children gathering scattered belongings. Despite the work, the atmosphere was calm. People greeted him with nods, neither surprised nor uneasy by his arrival. The acceptance eased some of the tension he carried. Nalina approached from the center of the camp, wearing a dry buckskin tunic and carrying 2 baskets. When she saw him, her expression softened into something quiet and sincere. "You came," she said simply. "I wanted to see how the storm treated your camp," Elias replied, "and to understand more, not just bits and pieces." She handed one basket to a young girl and motioned for Elias to walk with her. As they moved through the settlement, she explained what the elders had not voiced during his last visit. The losses over the past years had left their band with unbalanced numbers, far more women than men, and many of those men either too old or too young to guide the community's growth. Several families had taken in children from other groups to help them survive, but it was not enough to sustain their traditions long term. Elias listened, taking in every detail. The questions that had lingered in his mind began to settle. He now understood the widow's request was not simply about children. It was about preserving the structure of their community, its skills, its customs, its sense of belonging. They reached a small shelter built from woven branches. Inside, bundles of herbs hung along the walls. Nalina explained their uses: medicines for fever, pain, childbirth. Elias noticed how carefully they were arranged and how many hands were needed to keep the supplies stocked. It became clear how much pressure the widows carried, balancing survival and tradition with dwindling help. As they walked on, Elias saw older boys repairing hunting tools. He paused, watching their focused hands. One boy struggled with a dull blade, trying to sharpen it on a worn stone. Elias crouched beside him and offered guidance. "Hold the angle steady," he said. "If you change it, the edge won't stay even." The boy followed his instructions, and the blade sharpened cleanly. His eyes lifted with a spark of confidence. Nalina watched the exchange silently, her expression shifting with something deeper than simple appreciation. "You teach gently," she said once they resumed walking. "I try not to push," Elias answered. "People learn better when they're not afraid." The statement surprised even him. He had not spoken in that way for years. They stopped near the communal fire, where an elder sat shaping wooden tools. The elder lifted his gaze to Elias. "You return with open eyes," he observed. "This is good. Decisions are clearer when a man sees not only the women, but the world they work to protect." Elias lowered his head respectfully. "I came because I needed to be sure I understood what was being asked." The elder nodded. "Now you see, the widows carry the burden of the next generation, but they also carry grief. A man who stands with them must do so with steadiness." Nalina guided Elias back toward the edge of camp. Her steps slowed as they reached the place where he would mount his horse. "Do you feel more certain?" she asked. "I feel more responsible," he replied honestly. "I understand the weight better now." She studied him for a moment, her eyes searching, not for the answer itself, but for the truth of his direction. "Your choice must come from inside, not from pressure." Elias hesitated. Something else hovered inside him, something that had grown quietly during their conversations and the storm. He decided to ask a question he had been holding back. "Why were the three of you chosen," he said, "and not others?" The elders must have had a reason. Nalina took a slow breath. "We are widows who still have strength to raise children. We have no husbands to dishonor, and we trust each other. We also trust ourselves to share the responsibility fairly." She paused. "But the elders also believed we would approach you with care. We do not force. We do not demand. We ask and we wait." Her honesty settled something unresolved inside Elias. He now understood not just the why, but the who. These women were not searching for convenience. They were looking for a man whose character aligned with their values. He mounted his horse slowly, still absorbing everything he had seen. Nalina stepped back, giving him space but keeping her gaze steady. "When you are ready," she said, "you will come to us with your answer." Elias rode home through the warming afternoon, the camp shrinking behind him. The ranch waited in the distance, familiar and stable, but it no longer felt like the only place he belonged. For the first time, he began to picture a life that included other footsteps in the yard, other voices around the fire, other hands working beside his. The idea no longer felt foreign. It felt possible. Elias spent the next days working the ranch with an unusual restlessness, moving through chores with more intensity than needed. He repaired the corral rails, treated a cut on one of the geldings, sorted through old harnesses, and cleared fallen branches from a storm. None of it settled the tension inside him. His mind kept circling the same questions: what kind of man he truly was now, what responsibilities he could carry, and whether he was capable of giving the widows the future they hoped for. As the sun set on the third evening, He found himself pacing the porch instead of sitting down as he usually did. The sky glowed orange against the desert ridge, and the air cooled just enough to make the boards beneath his boots creak. His hands stayed restless, rubbing against each other, tapping against the railing, folding and unfolding without purpose. He finally admitted the truth to himself. The uncertainty was no longer about their request. It was about his own past and the parts of his life he had never allowed anyone close enough to see. When morning came, he saddled his horse and rode toward the settlement again, not to observe this time, but to speak. The camp was busy with preparations for the coming autumn. Women sorted dried herbs, children gathered wood, and the younger men repaired tools for the hunting season. Elias dismounted quietly, feeling dozens of small movements around him, but no discomfort. The people treated him not as a stranger intruding, but as a man with purpose. Nalina approached from a row of drying skins, her steps steady, her eyes calm. She studied his face carefully before speaking. "You look troubled," she said. "Sit with me." They walked to a shaded area near a large rock where the wind passed softly. Elias sat, resting his forearms on his knees. Nalina lowered herself beside him, giving him space but keeping her attention focused. He took a slow breath before speaking. "I've been trying to make a choice," he said, "but I keep thinking about something I've avoided for years. I'm afraid of becoming responsible for a life I might fail. I've lost too many people, some because of decisions I made, some because I didn't know how to stop what was coming." Nalina didn't interrupt. She listened with the same patience she always carried, waiting for him to continue. Elias's voice lowered. "I don't want to bring children into the world only to repeat the same mistakes. I don't want to be a man who leaves more hurt behind him." At this, Nalina turned slightly toward him. Her expression was steady, but her tone carried a strength he had not heard before. "Children do not need a perfect man," she said. "They need a steady one, a man who shows up, a man who listens, a man who learns. You speak as if you were alone in raising them, but you are not. We are 3 women, 3 homes, 3 sets of hands. We do this together." He absorbed her words carefully. They answered something unspoken inside him, whether he would be expected to carry all the weight alone. He realized now that the widows sought partnership, not possession, support, not control. Nalina continued, her voice calm. "Your past hurts you, but it also shaped you into someone who does not run from danger, someone who protects even when afraid. We saw that in the storm. We saw it the first day we met you." Elias looked down at the dirt, working through her words slowly. Her certainty about him was something he had never experienced. It pressed against the doubts he carried, forcing him to examine them more honestly. She leaned forward slightly. "If you walked away from us, it would not be from inability. It would be from fear of belonging, not fear of failing." Her words hit directly, leaving him momentarily silent. He finally asked the question that had weighed on him most. "If I say yes, what does life look like here?" Not in vague terms. In truth. Nalina gave a thoughtful nod. She spoke plainly. "You would split time between your ranch and our camp until we decide what works best. You would take part in teaching the boys skills they need. You would guide the children we hope to bring into the world. You would share meals, work, and decisions with us. Not as someone above or below. As equal." Her voice softened. "You would not be asked to marry unless you choose it. You would not be bound to one woman unless your heart chooses that path. What we ask is commitment, not ownership." Elias absorbed every word, each one settling like a weight that somehow felt lighter instead of heavier. The picture she painted was not of a man pulled into a life he couldn't sustain. It was of a man joining a structure that already existed, where his presence mattered but did not dominate. He let out a slow breath. "I needed to hear that." Nalina watched him with careful eyes. "What do you feel now?" Elias hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I feel like I've spent years living as if I have nothing left to give. But maybe I was wrong." For the first time, Nalina's expression shifted into something softer, still restrained, still respectful, but carrying a quiet warmth he had not seen before. "Then you're closer to your answer than you think." They sat in silence for several moments. No pressure, no urgency, only a steady shared calm. Elias stood at last. "I'll return soon," he said. Nalina arose with him. "We will be here." On his ride back, the land felt different. The open space no longer reminded him of emptiness. It reminded him of possibility. The fear inside him had not vanished, but it no longer controlled the path ahead. For the first time in years, he felt the beginning of a choice that came from hope rather than survival. Elias returned to the ranch with a sense of clarity that made the land look different. The shadows across the corral no longer felt heavy, and the silence around the house no longer pressed against him. For the rest of the day, he moved through his work with a steady focus, patching a section of fence, checking the water troughs, brushing down the horses. Yet his mind kept drifting toward the widow's words. The fear that once shaped every thought had softened. What remained was responsibility, but also a quiet sense of direction. By evening, he knew he could not delay any longer. The widows deserved an answer, and he finally understood that avoiding them would only deepen the uncertainty for all of them. He washed up, changed his shirt, and saddled his horse. The sky was shifting into deep orange when he rode out, the dust rising lightly behind him. The Apache camp glowed with small fires scattered through the valley. Children played near the riverbank. Elders spoke in low voices near the center, and the smell of cooked maize drifted through the air. People noticed his arrival, but no one approached him. They gave him room to choose his own steps. Nalina appeared from beside a shelter, stopping a few paces away. Her expression was still and calm, but Elias sensed a tension beneath it, a quiet waiting that carried more weight than words. Lanza and Oyana sat near a fire with baskets in their laps, pretending to work while their eyes flicked toward him. Elias dismounted and approached the group. His heart beat hard, not from fear of the answer, but from the significance of speaking it aloud. He stopped where all three women could hear him. "I've come with a clear decision," he said, his voice steady. "I want to stand with you, not as an outsider, and not because you expect it, but because I believe I can be part of what you're building." The relief on Lance's face appeared first, subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. Oyana placed a hand lightly over her chest, exhaling with a soft, grateful breath. But Nalina remained still, watching him with an expression he could not fully read. She stepped closer. "You choose this freely?" she asked, her voice low and direct. "Yes," Elias answered, "but not blindly. I understand the work, the responsibility, and the weight of what you're asking. I also understand what I bring. If I give myself to this, it will be with my full presence." Nalina's posture softened a fraction. She studied his face with a seriousness that made the moment feel grounded and real. "We asked for children," she said quietly, "but we also ask for a man who stays. A man who works with us, not above us." Her tone deepened. "If you stand with us, you stand with our people, not only with three women." Elias nodded. "I accept that." A brief silence followed. Then Lanza rose from the fire and approached him. "We thank you," she said. "You give us hope we haven't felt in years." Oyana followed, her voice gentle. "This will not be easy at all times, but we will carry the weight together." Nalina remained last. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes locked on his, testing the truth behind his confidence. When she finally spoke, her tone was steady but filled with meaning. "If you take part in our future," she said, "you join us in every step, raising the young, guiding them, helping our homes grow stronger. This is not a single moment. It is a life shaped together." Elias felt the truth settle inside him without resistance. "That's what I want," he said, the words coming naturally. "Not to give something once and walk away, but to build something that lasts." For the first time, Nalina's expression changed into something unmistakably warm. It wasn't a smile, just a faint lifting around her eyes, a softening of tension, a quiet acceptance. She reached out and rested her hand on his forearm. The touch was brief but grounding. "You have given your answer," she said. "Now we begin the work." The other women gathered closer, forming a small circle around the fire. The elders noticed from across the clearing and nodded in approval, acknowledging the decision without ceremony. One of them lifted a bowl of water and placed it near the fire, a quiet symbol that the agreement was seen and accepted by their community. As the night settled in, Elias remained with them, sharing food and conversation. He listened more than he spoke, absorbing the rhythm of the camp, the laughter of children, the steady voices of women discussing the coming season. He felt no pressure, no sense of being out of place, only the growing certainty that he belonged in this circle. Nalina leaned closer as the fire crackled. "There will be questions from others," she said softly. "Not challenges, just understanding. They will want to know how you wish to be part of us." Elias nodded. "I'll answer honestly." She met his eyes again. "And what do you want from us?" He considered the question carefully. "Only that you tell me when I need to listen and tell me when I need to step in. I don't want to misunderstand my place." Nalina gave the faintest nod of approval. "We can do that." The night deepened, but Elias felt lighter than he had in years. He looked around the fire, at the three women who had approached him with a difficult request, at the community slowly rebuilding itself, at the lives he was choosing to be part of, and he felt something he had not felt since boyhood. A beginning, not of duty, not of fear, but of a future he chose with clear eyes. In the days that followed Elias's decision, the ranch gradually shifted from a solitary homestead into a shared place of work and preparation. The widows began arriving each morning, bringing tools, woven blankets, rope, dried meat, and anything else they thought might help. They moved through the ranch yard as if they had always belonged there, repairing damaged boards, clearing debris from the storm, and organizing supplies for the coming winter. Elias found himself adjusting to the change more easily than he expected. The presence of steady footsteps, quiet voices, and shared labor filled the ranch with a sense of movement that had been missing for years. He noticed how naturally the women worked together. Lanza with her calm precision, Oyana with her quick hands and practical eye, and Nalina with her focused, silent determination. Each knew what needed to be done without debate, and Elias learned to follow their rhythm. As they worked, the widows revealed more of their lives. Lanza spoke of weaving and her hopes of teaching the younger girls before the next cold season. Oyana explained how she had been responsible for training ponies since her husband's death, and how she wished the children could grow up with confidence around animals. Nalina said little about herself, but Elias could see her leadership reflected in the way the others paused for her approval or checked her expression before making decisions. One afternoon, while repairing the barn roof together, Elias asked her something that had lingered in his mind. "Do your people understand what this choice means for you?" he asked. "Not just the band, you." Nalina adjusted the rope she was holding and looked down from the beam. "They know I stand for my people, but they also know I choose freely. No one pushes me toward this path." Her response settled another question Elias had carried, whether she was acting only out of duty. Now he understood that she had made this decision with her own judgment, not out of pressure from the elders. As the days passed, the division between the ranch and the Apache camp began to blur. The widows would sometimes bring their meals to share, and Elias found himself eating beside them more often than alone. His movements grew less hesitant around them, and his voice steadier. He learned small details, the way Nalina preferred tasks done in straight, clean lines, how Lanza organized tools by weight and size, how Oyana hummed softly while working with the horses to keep them calm. One morning, the three widows arrived earlier than usual. Nalina walked ahead, carrying a rolled-up bundle of deerskin stretched on a wooden frame. When Elias looked at it with confusion, she explained, "We want to help make space for the children to come. This will be part of their bedding." The realization struck him quietly. They were preparing not only the ranch, but the future itself. They set to work expanding the living area into a separate room beside the barn. The walls were framed with stronger wood, the roof patched to prevent leaks, and the floor reinforced. The widows worked with efficiency, their movements unhurried but purposeful. Elias helped them carry beams and hammer supports into place, surprised by how naturally the teamwork flowed. As the structure grew, so did the sense of unity among them. In the evenings, they sat outside near the fire, talking about the seasons ahead. Elias learned which crops the band traded most often, which hunting grounds they relied on, and how their children learned stories around shared fires. The widows listened when he spoke too, about his father's teachings, about the land he inherited, about the mistakes he wished he could undo. They did not judge. They simply took in his words with steady understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Nalina lingered beside him while the others cleaned tools. She looked toward the horizon before speaking. "There is something you should know," she said. "We did not ask you only because you're steady or kind. We asked you because we believe you can build a life with us. Not just a moment, a life." Elias felt the weight of her words, not heavy, but grounding. He realized he had been waiting for this truth without knowing it. "And what kind of life do you want from me?" he asked. "One where you stay," she said plainly. "One where you help raise the children, guide them, and let them guide you. We want someone who will not walk away when times change." Elias met her gaze, and for the first time he felt certain of his place beside her. "I don't intend to leave," he said. "Not anymore." Her expression softened, subtle, but warm enough for him to notice. She stepped closer, her voice quieter. "Then this is not only our future. It is yours too." The air shifted between them, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, grounded sense of trust that had taken weeks to build. There was no rush, no expectations spoken aloud, only acknowledgement. That night, the four of them sat around the fire, sharing food and quiet conversation. The feeling of solitude that had once defined the ranch was gone. In its place was a slow-forming unity that felt stronger than anything Elias had known for years. As the flames crackled and the stars brightened above, Elias looked at the three women beside him and saw not a request he had reluctantly accepted, but a life he was beginning to build with them. The ranch was no longer a place held together by one man. It was becoming a home built by four hearts working toward the same future. Autumn settled firmly over the land, bringing cooler winds and long stretches of golden light across the valley. The ranch looked different now, stronger, more lived in, more purposeful. The new living quarters stood solid beside the barn, lined with fresh wood and woven coverings. The widow's baskets were stacked neatly near the doorway, and herbs hung from the beams to dry. There was always movement somewhere, someone grinding maize, someone tending a fire, someone checking the horses. Elias found himself waking each morning with a sense of direction rather than the usual hollow routine. The widows arrived before sunrise, and the four of them began their tasks together. Some days they worked the land. Other days they rode to the Apache camp to gather supplies or meet with elders. What once felt like two separate worlds now blended into a single path Elias walked without hesitation. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their new life formed naturally. Lanza organized lessons for the children, teaching them weaving and simple household crafts. Oyana handled the horses, guiding the boys and caring for the ponies and teaching them to ride with confidence. Nalina took charge of managing supplies and ensuring the new quarters held warmth against the coming winter. Elias joined all three in their work, shifting between tasks as needed, never feeling out of place. As the bond between them deepened, people from the Apache camp began visiting more often, elders offering advice, children looking for guidance, women bringing food or blankets. Elias realized that he was no longer seen as an outsider stepping cautiously into their lives. He was regarded as a part of the community, a man who showed up without wavering. One cool morning, as he repaired the gate latch, Nalina approached him quietly. She watched him work for a moment before speaking. "We have news," she said. "Good news." Elias straightened, sensing the weight behind her words. Nalina's expression softened with a rare, gentle certainty. "It has begun," she said. "Lanza and Oyana feel the first signs, and the elders believe the blessing will come to me as well." Elias felt a stillness spread through him. He understood now what they had all worked toward, hoped for, and prepared for. The future they had spent months shaping was no longer a possibility. It was becoming real. He looked at Nalina, studying the steadiness in her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am," she answered. "More than I expected to be." You stand with us, and that gives strength. Her honesty carried more weight than any celebration could. It confirmed everything he had wondered quietly, whether the widows were truly ready, whether they still felt fear, whether they trusted him fully. Their calmness answered every question. The news spread through the camp and the ranch without ceremony, but with a steady warmth. Elders visited to offer blessings. Children gathered near the fires with excitement. The widows worked with even greater focus, preparing bedding, storing food, and arranging spaces for the coming infants. Elias helped wherever he was needed. He repaired tools, checked the roof for leaks, hunted small game for fresh meat, and strengthened the walls of the new living quarters. In the evenings, he sat with the widows by the fire, listening as they discussed the seasons ahead, how the children would be raised, which traditions they would pass on, and how the community would adapt to the growth. One night, after the others had gone to rest, Nalina remained beside him. The firelight moved softly across her face, and the cool night air settled around them. She looked at Elias with a depth that spoke of everything they had quietly built together. "I want to ask you something," she said. Elias turned toward her. "Ask, do you stand with us because you feel responsible?" Nalina asked, "Or because you want this life?" He did not answer immediately. He looked at the fire, watching the flames shift. Then he spoke with the clarity he had been discovering piece by piece. "I stand with you because I choose this life," he said. "Because I want to be here when the children are born. I want to raise them with you. I want to see this place grow, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs." Nalina breathed slowly, her shoulders easing in a way he rarely saw. "Then you're not only giving to us, you're giving to yourself." Elias felt the truth of it settle inside him. He had lived years believing he was a man meant for solitude, someone shaped only by loss. But here, with the widows beside him and a future building slowly around them, he understood something he had never allowed himself to believe. He was not broken. He had simply never been given a place to stay. Winter approached quietly, bringing cold mornings and long nights. The widows moved into the new quarters, and the ranch adapted to the changing season. One evening, snow began to fall lightly across the valley, rare but not unheard of at this time of year. The flakes drifted down in slow spirals, settling across the rooftops and the bare ground. Inside the warm quarters, the widows gathered near the fire, their hands resting over their swelling bellies. Elias sat with them, feeling the strange, grounding peace of knowing that the life forming here was part of him, part of all of them. Weeks later, as the cold deepened, the first cries of newborn twins filled the room, strong, steady, healthy. The widows wept quietly, their hands trembling with joy. The elders blessed the children, and the camp celebrated with soft songs and warm food. Elias held the newborns in his arms. The weight of them was small, but the meaning was immense. He looked at their faces, red, fragile, alive, and felt something settle so deeply inside him that it reshaped the ground beneath his life. This was his family, not by blood alone, but by choice, trust, and shared courage. Nalina stepped close, resting her hand lightly over his. "We asked for a man who would stay," she said. "And you stayed." Elias looked around the room, the widows, the elders, the quiet warmth of the new home, and felt a fullness he had not known since boyhood. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Outside, the snow fell softly, covering the land in a calm, bright layer. Inside, the ranch was alive with new breath, new warmth, and a future built by four hearts that refused to face the world alone. The story closed on a home no longer defined by empty rooms or silence, but by the sound of small voices, shared footsteps, and a life finally whole.